Obedient. Episode 1. Chapter 5. The Window Glitch. Kara rises from Station 3C with the same measured calm she has trained into her bones. But the orange eye of the risk flag follows her everywhere now, not as a visible icon, but as a pressure in the air, a sense that the building is watching her more closely than it watches the others, as if she has become a problem the system intends to solve. The audit floor continues humming behind her. Ventilation, processors, thousands of soft taps authorizing years to vanish. Yet her own screens remain locked under supervisory hold, her authority quietly removed and replaced with harmless clerical work that keeps her seated and visible without letting her touch anything that matters. She spends the rest of the shift verifying audit logs she is no longer permitted to see the footage for, tapping verify and flag like a pair of approved reflexes, while passive neutrality checks slide in and out of her interface, praising her eye movement, her facial tension, her blink rate, measuring her breath as if breath itself might slip into feeling. By the time the shift clock reaches 17:58, a final notice appears. Controlled exit route, assigned, and Kara stands, not too quickly, not too slowly, and walks down the aisle with her sleeve still lowered over the red digits on her forearm, feeling the difference in the way people pretend not to look at her. The micro pauses, the delayed head dips, the professional avoidance that turns her into an object they don't want to be near. At the doors, a lens brightens, and a two-tone chime signals that her status has changed. Pale blue arrows light up beneath her feet, routing her away from the main concourse and into a corridor labeled Assurance Exit, where scanner arches perform deeper passes than normal. Cool light washing over her face twice, then slower, then tighter, as if the system wants to confirm the exact shape of her neutrality. The building guides her into a glass-walled tube where she is visible from every angle, and the glass itself scrolls a message beside her head. Subject in transit. Do not engage, so that even strangers know she is marked. And when she reaches the final panel, a voice requests forearm presentation, and she lifts her left arm with slow obedience, pulling her sleeve back just enough to expose the chrono-chip digits, now smaller than they were yesterday, and the panel reads the time and asks her to confirm it out loud, like forcing her to speak her own reduction into existence. Exit granted, she steps into the civic transport connector, where the overhead screens still chant, "Compliance is longevity and time is earned." But the slogans feel thinner now, like cheap paint over rot, and she boards a silent tram and stands in her assigned square, while tunnel lights slide past, and her reflection ghosts in the window, and for the first time, she can't shake the sensation that surveillance has seeped inward, that her own face has become a liability, that her own muscles can betray her without her knowledge, that even thinking about the betrayal might tighten her mouth, or warm her eyes and cost her more. The tram delivers her back to her housing sector, and she walks through corridors that smell faintly metallic and too clean, back into her unit, where the walls brighten into their dim setting, and Lila's voice performs its manufactured calm, initiating an evening stability check that resembles the morning calibration, reminding her to hold the face of order as if order is something she can grip with teeth. Kara eats tasteless ration paste at her counter without distraction, because distraction can be pleasure, and pleasure can show, and showing can deduct. And when she finishes, she stands in the center of the room and allows the silence to settle around her like a lid, trying to be nothing more than a compliant body in a compliant box. Then the wall display flickers, not like a scheduled update, not like a civic bulletin, but like a nerve misfiring, static crawling across the surface, a thin, tearing sound in the speakers, and for a fraction of a second, the screen becomes a window into something the city does not permit. A group of people with open mouths and wet eyes, shoulders shaking, hands clapped to faces, laughter spilling out in full-body convulsions, not contained, not hidden, not punished, in that instant, as if the world has forgotten its rules long enough to breathe. The image vanishes immediately, replaced by the standard grey interface, and Kara's first motion is automatic, trained. She steps to the wall and files a report with 2 taps. Display anomaly, possible signal intrusion. Her face still neutral, her voice unused, her posture correct. The report submits. The room returns to quiet. But the moment remains inside her like an afterimage burned into the eye. Kara stands there longer than necessary, then reaches out and pulls up the playback menu she has no reason to open, except that her hand is moving as if guided by something older than obedience, and she finds a cached buffer file labeled only as static event, and when she replays it, the laughter flashes again, and something inside her chest shifts. Not joy, not yet, but a terrible wanting, a hunger for proof that the forbidden is real. She replays it again and again. Each time the people appear, her chrono-chip pulses faintly under her sleeve, and she tells herself she is only confirming the anomaly for accuracy, only documenting, only performing due diligence. Yet she keeps pressing replay as if the button is a door and her finger is a key. The room's light remains constant. The air remains clean. Leela does not speak, but the red digits beneath her skin tick down and down in small bites she refuses to look at, and by the time she finally forces herself to check her forearm, pulling the sleeve back with a sudden guilty jerk, she sees that months have bled away without her noticing. The numbers lower, the time stolen not by an external violation, but by her own private insistence on watching people laugh, and she stands frozen in the sterile glow of her unit, breath shallow, hands hovering near the screen as if she might press replay again, terrified of the cost and equally terrified of how much she wants to pay it. Chapter 6. Informal Contact. Kara keeps standing where she is, sleeve half raised, staring at the lower digits on her forearm, as if the numbers are an injury that might start bleeding again if she moves too suddenly. And when she forces herself to slide the cuff back down, she does it with painstaking care, smoothing the fabric so it looks like nothing happened, like no private crime is glowing under there. The wall display returns to its standard grey interface, obedient and blank, but the room no longer feels sealed. It feels thin, as if the laughing faces on the glitch broadcast left a hairline crack in her reality, and cold air is seeping through. She doesn't sleep. Sleep is dangerous now because the body loosens in sleep, and looseness is where twitches come from, and twitches become deductions. So instead, she waits in a controlled stillness until the housing block's pacing tone signals the approved morning cycle, and she dresses in the same grey uniform, aligns her posture for the morning calibration, passes it with the smallest margin she can manage, and leaves her unit with her face locked into that expressionless line that used to feel like protection. In the corridor, residents move in synchronized silence, no one looking at anyone, but Kara can feel their bodies registering her the way metal registers heat. The risk flag is invisible, yet it changes the space around her, makes people subtly widen their passing distance, makes a mother's hand grip a child's wrist a little tighter as Kara goes by, as if her presence is a cautionary tale. She takes the stairwell down, passes the landing, where the child had smiled days ago. But today, there is only grey concrete and cameras and the sour smell of disinfectant. And when she reaches the tram connector, she steps into the regulated flow of commuters with the practiced ease of a person who has always believed she belongs here. The tram arrives. Doors hiss. She stands in her assigned square. Tunnel lights flicker past. Her reflection in the window is faint and ghosted, and she keeps checking it without seeming to, watching for any warmth at the mouth corners, any dampness in the eyes, any betrayal in the muscles that have started acting like they have memories. At Civic Center, she disembarks and moves toward the department entrance. But before she reaches the intake assurance corridor, the elevator bank in the Civic connector opens behind her with a soft, mechanical sigh, and she hears footsteps that don't quite match the pacing tone, a fraction off, like someone choosing their cadence instead of submitting to it. She doesn't turn. Turning can be read as engagement, but the mirror panel beside the elevator catches the approaching figure, and she recognizes him instantly by the way he carries himself, as if the rules are something he wears rather than something he is made of. Dax Furrow steps into her peripheral vision and then into her space, close enough that the building's proximity sensors chirp softly, and he speaks in a voice kept deliberately low, not a whisper. Whispering looks conspiratorial, but a controlled murmur shaped for microphones to have trouble with. "Nice twitch," he says, like they're discussing a minor misfiled form, and Kara keeps her face neutral while every nerve in her body lights up at the familiarity of being addressed like a person. "I don't know what you mean," she answers, because denial is safer than clarity, and Dax's eyes flick toward her cuff as if he can see through cloth. "You lost years," he says, and the simplicity of it makes her stomach tighten. He isn't asking, he's stating, the way a man states the weather. Kara's hand hovers near the emergency stop panel beside the elevator, a reflex from childhood drills. If someone deviates, you freeze the space, you call for assistance, but she does not press it, because pressing it is action, and action becomes a report, and reports become questions, and questions become scrutiny. Dax watches her finger hover, and gives her something that might be amusement if amusement were allowed. But he keeps his mouth straight as he continues, "You're wearing your time like shame." And Kara's voice stays flat as she says, "Concealment is not recommended," because she can't stop herself from speaking in policy language when she's afraid. "Neither is smiling," Dax replies, and in that moment, the world narrows, not into panic, but into a kind of sharp, cold clarity. He knows exactly what happened in the mirrored corridor, and he is comfortable enough with that knowledge to bring it up in public, in a space full of cameras and regulated air. Kara keeps her eyes forward, aiming her gaze at the approved focal point on the wall across from them, and asks the safest question she can manage. "What do you want?" Dax's response comes after a small pause, as if he is choosing the precise angle of the blade. "Nothing," he says, then adds, "I just hate watching good people pretend they're stone." And the word good hits Kara strangely, not as praise, but as an illicit classification, a human assessment that the system never makes. She swallows once, controlled, and says, "You shouldn't speak like that." And Dax leans slightly closer, just enough to change the air between them, and says, "You ever cried?" Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the calm curiosity of a man asking about a hobby. And the question is so forbidden it makes Kara's skin prickle. Her finger finally presses the emergency stop panel. One clean motion, a sanctioned action, a way to cut the interaction off without saying why. Yet, when the elevator shudders and halts between floors. When the overhead lighting shifts to the softer emergency mode and the system voice begins its polite inquiry about passenger safety, Kara realizes she has trapped herself in a sealed metal box with him, and Dax's eyes flick up to the ceiling lens and back to her, and he says, almost kindly, "Don't worry, Kara. If you report me, you'll have to explain how you understood what I meant." And she stands perfectly still in the humming pause of the stopped elevator, face locked, heartbeat loud, while the system waits for someone to speak first. Obedient. Chapter 7. Unregistered Archive. The elevator hums in its pause state, suspended between floors like a held breath. Emergency lighting flattening Dax's features into something pale and almost clinical. Yet his eyes remain alive in a way the building does not approve of, and Kara keeps her finger pressed to the stop panel for half a second longer than necessary before releasing it, because holding it down feels like control, and she is suddenly aware that she has very little of that left. The system voice asks if assistance is required, tone perfectly neutral, and Kara answers, "No malfunction," before Dax can speak. Her voice steady enough to pass biometric scrutiny, and the elevator resumes its ascent with a soft, mechanical shudder that feels too much like a heart restarting. Neither of them moves as it climbs, but the air between them has shifted. It feels charged, not with romance or warmth, but with risk, the kind that sharpens rather than softens. "You shouldn't initiate emergency halts without cause," Dax says mildly, and Kara responds, "You shouldn't initiate prohibited dialogue," which earns her the faintest exhale from him. Almost a laugh, but swallowed before it forms. When the doors open onto Civic Center Level 3, they step out together into regulated brightness, and Dax does not walk away. Instead, he matches her pace toward the department intake as if proximity itself is a statement. "You saw something last night," he says quietly, not looking at her, eyes fixed ahead, and Kara's pulse spikes so suddenly she feels it in her throat. Because she did see something, and she did not report the replay count, and she did not calculate the months she lost until after the damage was done. "Anomaly reported," she replies, careful, precise, and Dax nods slightly as if confirming a hypothesis. "And then you watched it again," he says, "and it is not an accusation. It is certainty." Kara keeps walking, but her stride falters by a fraction, and the intake arch ahead brightens in anticipation of their approach, sensors ready, lenses alert. "You don't know that," she says, though they both understand that if he knows enough to ask, he knows enough to risk saying it aloud. "There are places," Dax continues, voice low enough that it blends with the hum of ventilation, "where the system forgets to erase everything." Kara should walk faster. She should step under the scanner and let the arches cleanse her of this conversation. Instead, she says, "That is misinformation," and Dax replies, "Then don't follow me." The words are soft, almost bored, but they land inside her like a dropped weight. He steps slightly out of sync with the intake flow, just enough to miss the first arch's scanning window, causing the line behind him to shift and recalibrate, and Kara has a split second to choose: enter the department and resume her monitored clerical existence, or allow her cadence to fall half a beat behind and miss the scan as well. Her body decides before her policy training can object. She slows. The arch chimes behind her for someone else. Dax turns left into a maintenance corridor marked Staff Only, a space analysts are not supposed to use, and Kara follows at a distance that can still be defended as coincidence. The maintenance corridor smells different, dustier, less filtered, air that hasn't been entirely stripped of character, and the lighting flickers slightly at the edges, not enough to trigger a system alert, but enough to suggest neglect. "You're making a mistake," Kara says under her breath, "because the cameras here are fewer but not absent." And Dax answers, "Probably," without turning around. They pass a locked door with a faded departmental insignia, then another, until Dax stops in front of a wall panel that looks like any other, smooth, grey, unremarkable, and presses his palm against a section of it. For a second, nothing happens. Then a hairline seam, almost invisible, appears, and the panel slides back just enough to reveal darkness behind it. Kara's stomach drops. Unregistered space is not supposed to exist inside a building that maps everything. "You can go back," Dax says, finally looking at her directly, and there is no mockery in his face now, only something steady and unguarded. Kara's chrono-chip pulses under her sleeve, warm and warning, as if proximity to this threshold is already costing her something. She could turn around. She could walk back into the intake corridor and report an anomaly in wall integrity and unauthorized employee deviation. Instead, she steps forward into the narrow opening, and the panel seals behind them with a soft, decisive click that sounds less like machinery and more like a door closing in a story that will not end well. The space beyond is dim, lit only by the faint glow of outdated monitors stacked along one wall, screens not connected to the official network, cables running like veins across the floor, and on those screens, paused, frozen mid-frame, are faces unlike any she has processed on the audit floor. People mid-laughter, mid-tears, mid-anger, raw and uncorrected, expressions allowed to bloom without red grids snapping into place. Kara stands there, breath shallow, eyes wide before she can stop them, and Dax says quietly, "Welcome to what they delete." Thank you for listening. Remember, if you enjoy this story and the channel, like, share, and subscribe to help us keep bringing you this and so many other stories just dying to be told, as long as the system allows it. Also, let us know how we're doing in the comments. See you next time for the continuation of Episode 1 of Obedient. Chapter 8, Deletion Protocol. The panel seals behind them with a soft, mechanical click that sounds far too gentle for something so final. And for a moment, Kara simply stands there, in the dim maintenance chamber, unable to move farther into the room. Her eyes drift slowly across the stacked monitors lining the walls, and the sensation that rises in her chest feels almost like vertigo, as though the ground beneath her has shifted several inches without warning. Every screen shows something she has spent her entire career erasing from existence. A woman is laughing with her head thrown back so far that her throat is exposed, the kind of open, unguarded laughter Kara has only ever encountered in disciplinary review footage moments before deletion. On another screen, a man weeps openly into his hands, shoulders trembling in a way that suggests not quiet grief, but overwhelming emotion he has made no attempt to suppress. Two people argue face-to-face in another clip, their voices clearly raised, though the footage is muted, their expressions flushed and animated, rather than flattened into the blank neutrality required by law. A child spins in circles on yet another screen, faster and faster, until she collapses in dizziness and joy, laughing breathlessly on the ground while the camera continues to record without interruption. There are no warning overlays, no red correction grids crawling across their faces, no system notifications flagging the violation. Kara stares as if she is looking through a window into a place that cannot possibly exist in the same city she lives in. The air in the room feels noticeably different from the corridors outside the maintenance sector. It is warmer, carrying the faint dusty scent of aging hardware and overheated processors that have been running far longer than any sanctioned equipment would be allowed to operate. Somewhere beneath the consoles, a cluster of unauthorized machines hums steadily, their combined vibration creating a low mechanical rhythm that fills the chamber like a second heartbeat embedded in the building's bones. The room feels strangely human, in a way the rest of the department never does, less sterile, less controlled, as if this space has been quietly breathing on its own for a long time, without permission. "These aren't glitches," Dax says. His voice is calm, almost conversational, but the statement lands heavily in the silence. He moves past her without hesitation, stepping between cables and equipment with the ease of someone who has walked this room many times before. When he reaches one of the monitors, he taps the side of the screen, and the frozen image shudders slightly before slipping back into motion. The woman's laughter spills across the display again, her shoulders shaking as she bends forward with the uncontrolled force of it, one hand braced against her stomach as though she can barely contain the feeling. "They're deletions." Kara feels her throat tighten before she can stop it. She recognizes the architecture in the background almost immediately. A civic plaza, 3 sectors east of the department complex. The wide stone steps and geometric fountain unmistakable. The angle of the camera matches one of the city's public observation nodes. This is not ancient contraband footage from before the rules tightened. It is not some mythological archive preserved from a forgotten time. This was recorded recently, and then erased. "Impossible," Kara says automatically, but the word leaves her mouth without conviction because she is looking directly at proof that contradicts everything the department has ever claimed to control. Her gaze moves from screen to screen again, taking in the scenes with growing unease. Strangers talking animatedly with their hands, someone wiping tears from another person's face, a man clapping someone on the back with visible excitement. Every expression is alive with something the system insists no one feels anymore. Dax crouches beside a tangle of cables running beneath the main console and pulls up another feed. The screen flickers before resolving into a new clip. A man stands on the edge of a rooftop, wind whipping his clothes as he throws his arms wide toward the sky. His mouth is open in a scream, but the shape of it is wrong for pain. The expression on his face is something Kara has seen only in training archives labeled obsolete. Exhilaration. The clip glitches and freezes. Dax rewinds it manually, bypassing a filtering layer Kara does not recognize. "They don't want eradication," he says quietly. He lets the clip play again, watching the man shout into the wind, with a strange calm that suggests he has been thinking about this for a long time. "They want containment." Kara turns toward him slowly. "If people believe no one else feels," he continues, "they police themselves. They flatten it before the system has to." The rooftop man throws his head back again, laughing this time, but feeling leaks. The words settle over the room, like dust. Kara feels the reaction in her body before her mind fully processes what she has seen. Her pulse has quickened, her breathing is slightly uneven. Beneath the sleeve of her uniform, the chrono-chip embedded in her forearm begins to warm faintly against her skin, reacting to subtle changes in heart rate and hormonal shifts. The system interprets as behavioral irregularities. "You're accelerating," she whispers. The realization slips out before she can stop it. Dax glances up at her and nods once. "So are you." He reaches across the table and picks up a small handheld scanner patched into the illegal system. When he angles it toward her forearm, a faint red glow passes through the fabric of her sleeve, projecting the countdown digits into the dim air between them like a ghostly reflection. Kara inhales sharply. Weeks are gone. Not hours. Weeks. The loss hits her harder than she expects. Time is supposed to disappear in response to clearly defined violations, visible infractions recorded by the system and reviewed by the department. Not because she walked into a room and watched something that stirred an emotion she cannot name. "You're siphoning," she says, the accusation coming out more uncertain than she intended. Dax shakes his head slowly. "No." He lowers the scanner. "You are." Kara frowns. "Your body is responding," he explains. The chip interprets response as violation. The explanation sits uneasily in her mind. On the central monitor, another clip begins to play automatically. Neither of them touches the controls. The footage shows a crowded underground room somewhere far below the city. People sit in a loose circle, talking over each other in animated bursts. Someone interrupts someone else. Two people laugh at the same moment and then begin arguing again immediately afterward. One woman wipes tears from her eyes, while another squeezes her hand in silent comfort. No one looks afraid. No one flattens their face. No one is pretending. Kara feels something inside her shift slightly. It is not fear. It is not curiosity either. It is recognition. "What is this?" she asks quietly. Dax watches the screen. "A place you can stay past curfew," he says. Then he glances at her. "And not disappear." The words should terrify her. Instead, she steps closer to the screen. "They'll find this," she says automatically, because the department eventually finds everything. Dax's expression tightens slightly. They're already looking. As if summoned by the admission, a faint vibration shudders through the wall behind them. Kara freezes. A thin red line of light appears along the seam where the hidden door meets the corridor outside. Scanning, slow, methodical. Her heart slams against her ribs before she can control it. "Deletion protocol," she says, automatically. Dax moves instantly. His fingers fly across the console, commands cascading across the monitors as the system begins initiating a manual wipe sequence. "If they breach this node," he says quickly, "they'll purge everything." Clips begin disappearing from the screens, one by one. The laughing woman vanishes. The rooftop man dissolves into static. The child spinning in circles collapses into grey. "Stop," Kara hears herself say. She does not know whether she means stop the deletion or stop the fear rising inside her chest. Because if these images disappear, there will be no proof that what she saw here was ever real. The red scanning line along the door brightens. The panel vibrates harder now. Metal screams as something on the other side begins cutting through. Dax grabs a small data shard from the table and presses it into Kara's palm. Her fingers close instinctively around it. "Take it," he says. His voice is urgent now. "If I don't make it out, take it." Kara stares down at the tiny shard resting in her hand. The smooth surface reflects the dim monitor light, and she suddenly understands that the entire archive, the laughter, the crying, the arguments, the proof that human emotion still exists in hidden corners of the city, may now be contained in the small piece of storage pressing into her skin. For a brief moment, she imagines returning to her apartment alone, playing these forbidden images over and over again, watching until the system drains her life away. The wall panel splits open with a sharp metallic snap. White corridor light floods the room. Surveillance drones glide silently through the breach. Behind Kara, the final monitors blink to black. Chapter 9: The Last Smile. White corridor light floods the hidden room in a hard, sterilized sheet, washing over the dim maintenance chamber like a surgical incision and erasing every shadow that had made the space feel alive only moments earlier. The drones glide through the breach with quiet mechanical certainty, their polished shells reflecting the brightness in sharp geometric flashes as they enter one after another, their movements smooth enough to feel almost organic. Kara's eyes adjust slowly to the sudden intensity of the light, and as her vision clears, she becomes aware of the precise way the machines fan outward through the room, their flight paths calculated to eliminate blind spots, their lenses widening slightly as they register heat signatures, unauthorized processes, two human figures standing where no human presence should exist. Kara's hand tightens reflexively around the data shard Dax pressed into her palm moments before the breach. The edges bite faintly into her skin, grounding her in the physical sensation of the moment, as if her body is trying to anchor itself against the flood of awareness crashing through her thoughts. Behind Dax, the monitors complete their final collapse into blankness one by one, each screen flickering once before settling into the neutral gray compliance field the department expects to see. The laughter that filled the room only seconds earlier disappears entirely. The images erased so thoroughly that the monitors now resemble empty windows staring into nothing. The drones form a loose triangular formation around the center of the chamber, their lenses rotating in smooth, synchronized movements as red targeting grids begin flickering faintly across their optical surfaces. The grids extend outward, scanning the environment in thin lattice patterns that sweep across walls, consoles, cables, and finally, the two people standing in the middle of the room. Kara feels the invisible sweep pass over her body like a cold draft, and she knows instinctively that every measurable detail of her existence, body temperature, pulse rate, breathing rhythm, facial muscle tension, is already being fed into the system's predictive models. "Stand down," Dax says evenly. His voice carries no urgency, no tremor, as if he is speaking to colleagues rather than machines programmed to determine the acceptable limits of human life. Kara hears the absurdity of the command even as it leaves his mouth. These machines do not negotiate. They do not reconsider orders or pause for reflection. They observe, classify, and enforce. Yet something about the calmness in Dax's voice steadies her in a way she cannot explain. A synthetic voice projects from the lead drone a moment later. The sound is colder than the central system's usual tone, stripped of the polished warmth that Lila uses to soften directives for public consumption. This voice contains no attempt at comfort. Unauthorized occupancy, high visibility subject present, surrender required. The phrase lands with bureaucratic weight, each word spaced precisely enough to leave no ambiguity in its meaning. Kara feels the implications settle into her chest with a heavy finality. She is no longer merely trespassing inside an unauthorized maintenance sector. The phrase high visibility subject means escalation protocols have already been triggered somewhere beyond this room. Her presence has been flagged, categorized, and forwarded into higher layers of enforcement. Dax shifts slightly in front of her, not dramatically, not in any overtly protective gesture, but just enough to redirect the primary sensor's focus toward himself. "She's not part of this," he says. The lie is obvious, but the effort carries a strange tenderness that Kara feels more than she understands. Beneath the sleeve of her uniform, the chrono-chip embedded in her forearm begins to burn with sudden intensity. Heat radiates through the thin fabric as the system processes the environmental variables flooding in from the drone's sensors. Elevated pulse rate, unauthorized location, emotional deviation. Each factor compounds the violation score being calculated somewhere in the network. Present chrono chips for verification. Thin beams of red light extend from the drone's lenses, slicing through the sterile air and converging on their forearms. The beams hover there for a moment, waiting for confirmation, waiting for the simple act of compliance that would resolve the situation cleanly. Dax raises his arm first. His sleeve is already pushed back. The digits glow clearly against his skin. The scanning beam passes across the display, pauses, then recalculates. Kara hesitates. The hesitation lasts no more than a second, but in that second, something in her mind shifts with startling clarity. If she obeys, if she lifts her arm and allows the system to read the chip embedded beneath her skin, the shard hidden in her palm will be discovered. The drones will scan the object immediately. Its contents will be flagged and traced back through the building's hidden network. Everything Dax attempted to preserve in this room will become evidence instead of possibility. "Kara," Dax says quietly. He does not turn around. His voice does not sound like instruction. It sounds like recognition. The drone's lenses narrow slightly as micro-expressions ripple across Kara's face. Fear threatening the edges, something steadier rising behind it. Surrender required. This time, the tone carries a subtle shift that suggests the beginning of a countdown rather than a request. Kara becomes aware of something strange happening at the corners of her mouth. At first, she thinks the sensation is simply tension, a reflexive tightening caused by stress. But the muscles move again, and she realizes with sudden clarity that she is smiling, not broadly, not joyfully, just the smallest lift at one corner of her mouth. The forbidden motion spreads slowly across her face, like the first crack in a frozen surface. Her chrono chip reacts instantly. The heat in her forearm spikes as the digits begin dropping in accelerated increments she can almost feel passing through her bloodstream. But Kara does not correct the expression. Instead, she pulls back her sleeve deliberately, revealing the falling numbers in full view of the drones. Emotion is not permitted. The system's voice sounds almost puzzled now, as if confronted with behavior outside its predictive models. Kara lets the smile widen slightly more. The sensation feels strange and unfamiliar, the muscles in her face engaging in ways she has spent years suppressing. Across the room, Dax glances back at her. For the first time since she met him, his carefully neutral expression fractures completely. A flicker of laughter crosses his face. The drone's targeting grids snap sharply into place. Red geometry spreads across both of their faces, mapping bone structure, tracking muscle movement, recording deviation with clinical precision. Kara's digits plunge toward zero. Yet the panic she expected never arrives. Instead, she feels a strange calm settle inside her chest. Because this time, the smile is not accidental. This time, she chose it. Chapter 10. Freeze Frame. The rising whine of the drones intensifies until the sound becomes almost unbearable, climbing into a thin frequency that feels like vibrating glass somewhere deep inside Kara's skull. The red targeting grids tighten across her face and Dax's until their features dissolve into precise geometric outlines, data points arranged in neat digital symmetry. Every movement of their muscles is tracked, categorized, translated into numbers. But Kara refuses to let the smile fade. Her cheeks tremble under the strain of holding an expression that feels both fragile and impossibly strong. The muscles ache from unfamiliar use, and she becomes acutely aware of the warmth of blood moving through her face, the strange internal sensation of feeling her own expression rather than controlling it from the outside. The chrono-chip embedded beneath her skin burns like a brand. The digits cascade downward. Days vanish. Hours dissolve. Minutes she will never reach evaporate in brutal increments. Yet the sensation filling her chest is not fear. It is clarity. For the first time in her life, she is no longer calculating the exact angle of her jaw or the tension in her eyelids. She is not monitoring the position of her mouth to ensure compliance with acceptable neutrality. She is simply feeling. Final warning. The words sound procedural, almost bored. Dax laughs. An actual laugh. The sound is brief and sharp, bouncing once off the sterile walls before disappearing into the mechanical hum of the drone's charging emitters. Kara feels the data shard pressing deeper into her palm as her fingers tighten around it. For a moment, she realizes something unexpected. Whether the shard survives this moment no longer matters the way she thought it did. What matters is that she did not erase herself. The beams converge. White light floods the chamber. The dim maintenance room disappears entirely beneath the intensity of the discharge field. Kara's vision narrows until the only thing remaining in focus is Dax's face across from her. His expression is no longer neutral. It is alive with reckless joy. Her chrono-chip reaches its final count. The last red digit blinks once. 0. For a fraction of a second, everything seems to slow. The drones hover in perfect formation above them, their lenses continuing to record every frame of the moment with clinical devotion. The emitters discharge. The flash is silent. Energy ripples outward through the air like cold water spreading across glass. Kara feels the wave pass through her body, her muscles locking briefly before releasing as her knees begin to buckle beneath her. But the smile remains, not because she is strong enough to hold it, because there is no longer any system left inside her to force it flat. The white light recedes slowly. The maintenance chamber reappears piece by piece. Blank monitors, the cracked wall panel, the sterile corridor beyond. The drones hover silently above the fallen bodies for several seconds before projecting a final message into the air. Emotion is not permitted. Thank you for your compliance. The words linger in the room far longer than they should. Polite, absurd. Then they dissolve into nothing. The scene holds on Kara's face, eyes open, mouth curved in that impossible expression, as if the world itself has frozen on the one image the system tried hardest to erase. Thank you for listening to Obedient Episode 1. Stay tuned for more content, including our short stories. We truly appreciate your support. You help our channel grow by sharing our stories. Remember, the system is always watching. See you next Sunday for Episode 2 of Obedient.